So, without any further ado, I'm going to introduce my boss, Secretary Rick Sullivan. It's a pleasure to be working for him. He's led the state as a clean energy leader and has really been great on the subject of electric vehicles. Secretary.
Thanks, Linda. And before I forget, because it was nice to come here, it looks like in some ways I'm having a staff meeting here because all of my senior team, I believe, is in the room, which also speaks to how important this issue is for the administration. But I wanted to thank, in particular, Linda and Steve Russell for helping really pull this together here today. It really is your work that makes this possible, so thank you for your leadership. And at the risk of forgetting someone else from my staff, I did want to acknowledge that Bobby Cates Garnick, the Undersecretary for Energy, is here. Stephen Clark, the Assistant Secretary for Renewable Energies, is here. Ken Kimmel, Commissioner of DEP, is here. David Cash and Jolette Westbrook, Commissioners at the DPU, are here. I know Mark Sylvia, Commissioner of DOER, is here. Alicia Barton, CEC Chief Executive Officer, she is here as well. So truly, the Energy Secretariat and the Energy and Environmental Secretariat are well represented here today because this is an important issue, and it should not be lost on anybody. Sometimes when the governor is out talking about investments that need to be made in infrastructure and education and innovation, there is a large focus on kind of the traditional education, and roads and bridges kind of become the definition of infrastructure. But make no doubt about it that the investments in the environment and in clean energy are going to be greater in the budget that the governor has proposed, and the very definition of what we do best in Massachusetts around innovation in clean energy is embodied in the work that you're going to be doing here today in the field of electric vehicles. We have at the Secretariat included this technology certainly in our plans on climate change and global warming, and I do need to give Dave Cash a shout out for that as well, and for the great work that he did in putting our plan together, and it is an important part of the plan moving forward. We've integrated that with our friends over at MassDOT, and certainly over the last year there has been a great working relationship, certainly with Secretary Davey, but also Dave Moeller, who I know will be here today as well from MassDOT on their clean fuels and their electric vehicle activities. So it is a real coordinated effort to move forward. And I think we've certainly been pleased by some national trends and some statements by the car makers where they're indicating that they are bullish on electric vehicles and certainly hybrid technologies, and that their sales have topped historic highs, that there's 15 new plug-in hybrid, electric hybrid or all-electric vehicles that are currently in the model year 2013, 2014. And I think just earlier this week, Ford announced that they have seen a very fast-growing trend in this technology in their sales, which is certainly encouraging. And I also had the great fortune yesterday of, or actually on Tuesday, the days have kind of rolled together here because we were down in Washington, D.C., which, unlike Boston, immediately starts to shut down when there's even a forecast of snow. So it became impossible to get out of Washington, D.C. on a plane yesterday, even though there was absolutely no weather going on. So we kind of had one of those plane, trains, and automobiles days and took the Amtrak a 9-hour trip from D.C. to Westfield to be here this morning because I didn't want to disappoint Linda, actually. So thank you for my day yesterday. It was great. But there is Wi-Fi on the train, so it was good. But I was encouraged at a meeting that we had at the Department of Energy on Tuesday because I was just saying to John that they actually are excited about the future in the next 4 years, and he said, why in the world wouldn't they be? It's because they kind of see some stars aligning. Certainly President Obama in the State of the Union address began to talk about climate change, global warming, investments in the new technologies, clean energy as a leader. And the conversations that we were having, and I know Mark Sylvia has had some of the same, is they are then looking back to Massachusetts to help them put together the policies over the next 4 years to show investment in electric vehicles and other clean tech industries, and really to be able to take our model and replicate it on the national scene, because they have seen what strategic investments have done, certainly making good environmental policy, but also as a good economic development policy, seeing the growth in the number of companies doing business in Massachusetts in this technology and other clean tech areas, how many jobs have been created, and in fact it is now one of the fastest growing sectors here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And it's because of all the work of everybody here in this room, but it also just makes the most sense for the country moving forward. And certainly we've seen some louder voices kind of join the choir, Mayor Bloomberg and others certainly coming off of Sandy and the impacts there. So there seems to be, and maybe a little bit below the public radar screen at the moment, or at least the media radar screen, there's actually behind the scenes some bipartisan coming together, if you will, to be able to have some discussions around these areas. And I think that is certainly only good news for where we want to go as a nation, but it is also very good news for us here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, because we are already leading the way, and we will be able to do that in greater fashion because it's what we do best. And it is really where the governor starts to talk about innovation. Massachusetts is a leader in innovation, and we have a lot of companies that are working in this field and in this space, and that is only going to continue to grow. So it bodes well for us as a Commonwealth as well. So with all of that being said, I was told by Linda to say that we do have a number of vehicles in our fleet that are hybrid in nature, which are great, and we drive them often. But I did recently have the opportunity to drive MassDOT's new Chevy Volt the other day, and aside from getting great gas mileage and when you're in it, quite frankly, other than the fact that you can't hear anything and it is very quiet, which for me is rather distracting, lots of chaos, there's no reason not to buy one, because as we all know, the technology is such that the handling and the pickup and the driving experience is phenomenal, and it is only going to get better as the private sector does what it does best, which is invest in the technologies to put a better product, to make it more cost effective, and put it on the road. And that is exciting. We also then need to, as the government, and government does play a role in our daily lives, and certainly is going to play a role in this sector, we need to be also ready with the infrastructure to be in place to be able to handle the new technologies, and building out the charging stations, and building out the other parts of the industry that need to be there to handle it from an infrastructure point of view. So again, it ties back to the governor's discussion about infrastructure, and while he says, you know, he shows, he will lead with roads and bridges and kind of the traditional transportation type of discussions, you need to know it's not because he doesn't love us, it's just because you can only talk about so many things at once, and you need to be focused and committed. But infrastructure also includes the build out of the electric vehicle sector, not only here in the Commonwealth, but playing our part to help build that out nationally. So we are excited. We will continue to run the grant programs and the incentive programs that we have at DOER and the Clean Energy Center to grow this industry. You have to know that given everybody in this room, there is a lot of very personal commitment and passion from the very individuals that lead the different parts of the Secretariat to EV in particular. So that is only going to continue, and I think I'm safe in saying that over the next couple of years of the Patrick Murray administration, that is only going to increase. I do have to recognize one other person that I know is here from MassDOT, from the aviation point of view, who has been a great partner, Chris Willenberg, who runs MAC Mass Aeronautic Commission over there. Is it still called MAC, or did you change your name like everybody else over there?
Yeah, we changed. Aeronautics.
Oh, it's sounds like a much bigger title, but Chris has been great tying us into all of the aviation assets that the Commonwealth has as a place where you can grow the EV infrastructure as well. So Chris, thank you for being here as well. And with that, I have probably one real important job today, which is to introduce a great partner and certainly leader in this sector, John Castle from CLF, who's been the president since 2009, and prior to that was the Secretary of Vermont's Agency of Natural Resources. And CLF just is a great partner. We agree a lot. Not always. But they are a great partner and a loud voice in a good way. And so we can exchange loud for passionate voice, driving us to a certain good spot for our environment here in Massachusetts, but certainly nationally. So I thank John for his good work and for the partnership with CLF. And without any further ado, John Castle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. It's very kind of you. We do agree a lot, and when we disagree, we try to disagree in an agreeable way. And thank you all for coming. And those of you who are on your way or listening, if we have the technology, thank you for being here in spirit. It's a great pleasure to co-convene and co-sponsor this event with the Secretariat. It was born of an idea a number of months ago. It's taken a lot of hard work to get here, and although there are lots of CLF people in the crowd, I really want to give a special shout out to Jenny Rushlow, one of our terrific staff advocates who has really done a huge amount of work to pull all this together. And I can tell you that she's got texts on her phone right now depicting the state of traffic in Connecticut, which is tying up some of our speakers. And she's not even worried about it. Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary. You outlined the terrific work that's happening here in Massachusetts. And that points up the what and the why. And I want to just say a few words about that and then get into the how, which is what today is all about. The what, I would suggest, is the challenge before us, and that is to dramatically increase the penetration of electric vehicles in Massachusetts. There are 900 vehicles, electric vehicles, registered in Massachusetts right now. My good friend and former colleague Karen Glickman, who's here in the third row from Vermont, informs me that per capita, Vermont has twice as many electric vehicles as Massachusetts. What is up with that, right? And if you think about it, you know, if early adopters are 4% by some social theories, you know, let's go to the early adopters. 4% of the population of Massachusetts is 250,000 people, right? We ought to be able to dramatically increase the number of EVs on the road in Massachusetts, and that's essential. That's the what. Why? It's essential because A, it's required by the terrific climate action plan that we have pursuant to the Global Warming Solutions Act. This is required by law in Massachusetts, and it's also necessary to save the health of the planet. We have to have electric vehicles on the road in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, which we know are somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of emissions, whether you're looking at state, regional, or national, and they're the most difficult emissions to really control. Dramatic electrification of the transportation sector is key to meeting the climate reduction target, the greenhouse gas reduction targets that climate scientists are unanimous about. Not only in 2020, but in 2050. So we've got to get started on this. Now, how? Much of today's discussion is going to be about, I will say, kind of wonky policy stuff. Let me say, first of all, it's great to have so many government officials in the room and advocates, and I see some representatives of industry, and I welcome you. It's terrific to have you here. You'll have discussions today about policies we need to put in place, the chicken or egg question, is it chargers first or cars first? What kinds of incentives do we have to create and where? And all of that stuff is very, very important. But I want to take a moment to get personal with you, because I think it's very important that we remember that this is personal. This is people's cars we're talking about, right? And we are Americans, so we have a love affair with our cars. And the way to get cars on the road is to really think about how we can connect with the consuming public and put them out there. And I'm going to tell you a little personal story to highlight the point. This wonderful vehicle was an adopted member of my family. My wife and I have 3 children. And for about 8 years, we had this 4th child, which my children, who drove it, fondly called the Lexus. It's not a Lexus, but I thought it was a pretty good pun on electric anyway. Some of you will recognize this car. This is one of the original Secretariat Forces. It's a 1994 Geo Metro chassis, essentially, with a bunch of electric components. It was assembled in Woburn, not far from here, and through a series of steps, I bought it in around 2000. Just as my kids were entering their driving years, by the way, and I would recommend for all of you who are there, Jeremy, you're not quite there yet, but you might as well start thinking about it. Having an electric vehicle in the family when your kids are driving is a great idea, because at least this one didn't go very far, and it didn't go very fast. But kids really get a sense of the power of a vehicle, because as you know, if you've driven a pure electric vehicle, you really think about hills, right? Because it matters whether you're going up or you're going flat. You conserve energy. It's a great teaching tool. This one is an old school lead acid, 13 lead acid battery powered vehicle. It had 13 12-volt batteries connected in series, so it was 156 volts. At the time we got it, it was well along in its life. It was a pretty cranky vehicle, I can tell you. It really only had about a 25 to 30 mile range, and it depended on the time of year and all kinds of other things. And the charging time was slow, but we charged it with a regular 110 outlet. It was a wonderful member of our family. And people loved it. People would stop me on the street and ask me about it. When in 2007, gas prices spiked and went up to $4 or $5 a gallon. You can't believe how many conversations I had with people. They bring it in to have the tires changed or have it serviced, and there isn't that much servicing to be done on an electric car. And I inevitably get into a long conversation with all of those guys in the shop about this car. And they all wanted one, and they wanted to know where could we get one. And at the time, and for years, we had no product. We finally have products. We finally have vehicles on the market. And we have vehicles that people will buy and will drive and will be just as captivated as we were to drive this car. And I would note that everybody gets captivated by this car. My neighbors loved it. One of my favorite things to do was pick up a hitchhiker, which I would recommend if you're driving an electric car. You know, frequently you go along and, you know, they look over after about 30 seconds and say, what is this thing? You know, why is it not making any sound? And how does it work? And then you show them the amp meter and the state charge meter, and they get really into it. They say, all right, let's try gliding down this hill, and let's try recharging. And you get into this question about whether you can really drive this car forever and not ever charge it up. And you have to get into, well, anyway. It's fascinating. People love electric cars because they love cars, and they love to do the right thing, and they love cars that are unusual. So I would suggest that if we can keep in mind in our conversations today how to capture that imagination and that love of vehicle and that innate curiosity that the American driving public has, we are much more likely, and stimulate that, we are much more likely to succeed. And success really has to be measured by a dramatic increase, I want to repeat this, a dramatic increase of electric vehicles on the road in Massachusetts and in New England. Let's not sell them all in California. That's not good enough. I think Secretary Sullivan is exactly right. The country looks to New England as a region, and it looks to Massachusetts as a state to be a model, and let's show them how it can be done. And that means we're going to have to take some strong positions on the regulatory and policy front, but most importantly, we've got to make it attractive. And I would say there's great hope going forward, and that hope really lies in young people. Any of you who have high school age kids, know, or you remember this yourself. When you graduate from high school, most high schools elect, they have what are called the high school superlatives or awards or something. Most likely to succeed, best hair, best smile, best jump shot, whatever. At Burlington High School in Burlington, Vermont, where my kids went to school, they had best car. And one of our kids drove this car every day to school. He drove a lot of his friends around in it. And there were people in his class who had, you know, the funky old van that was everybody loved because it was kind of a party vehicle or whatever. And there was the old muscle car that some kid in shop had geared up and was an amazingly powerful vehicle. And someone had a, you know, an old sports car that was very fast and fancy and that sort of thing. And my son won best car for that motley, lovable little thing. And I think that's a huge sign of hope. This was in 2007. Young people today are not driving cars. They're not owning cars. Many of them don't have licenses. They're sharing cars. They're interested in innovative ways to get around. And this is an innovation we can sell to them. So America has a love affair with cars. We know that. They will love the electric car. They already do. So let's not, in our policy discussions today, lose sight of the fact that we can also make this cool and even sexy. And we should try to do that. And for anyone who's from a marketing background or is from the car manufacturers, you know how to do this, right? You know how to sell cars to people. I would challenge you today to come up to share ideas with how we can learn how to sell these cars to people. Because that's the only way, frankly, that we will meet the what, that is dramatic decrease in GHG emissions over time from the transportation sector, and that's so important. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Secretary Sullivan, and all of the staff who worked so hard to put this together. I look forward to hearing the results of this terrific day.